In this presentation, we're going to talk about updating or correcting your space attributes and possibly adding a secondary space type. This is the last part of step 3, inputting data into Portfolio Manager and getting a score. So far in step 3, we've looked at how you register for a Portfolio Manager account, set up your school facility in Portfolio Manager, then input data into Portfolio Manager and get a score. Now we're going to look at how you update or correct your space attributes and possibly add a secondary space type to your school facility. Now there are two ways to make changes to your space attribute values. You can either make a correction or you can make an update. The difference is a correction changes the value for the entire period from the effective date. An update is when something new happens and you're going to make that change effective on the date that you enter, on that date you enter the change or whatever date you specify. And here's an example. Let's say you used default values when you originally set up your Portfolio Manager account, and now you're going to put the actual values. That would be a correction. On the other hand, let's say your school added several portables and connected them to your main school meter. Or let's say you built a new wing onto your school and added a lot of square footage. Or your school decided to establish a computer lab and add 30 PCs. So those changes are new things that are happening, and you would enter the date, an effective date of the time that the actual change was made. And so the energy use that changes would correlate to the new time or the new date that you put in for those space attribute values. So we're going to look in Portfolio Manager to see what that looks like. And we're going to look at a couple of scenarios. One scenario, which we're already a little bit familiar with, is correcting default values. We're going to also correct floor area values. Then we're going to update floor area values. And we're going to update number of PCs. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to look at secondary space types. There are two that apply to your school facility. One is parking areas and the other is swimming pools. Not a lot of schools have swimming pools, but there are some out there. Parking lots are more typical, and especially if you have a lighted parking lot that's connected to your main school meter. There's a secondary space type for parking that allows you to account for the additional energy used in lighting the parking lot. In fact, correct spaced attribute values and the use of secondary spaces can make as much as a 5 to 10 point difference in your score. So it's very important to have accurate information in your Portfolio Manager account. So now let's go to Portfolio Manager and look at our school facility and see what this looks like. Here we are at the Greenway School facility page in our Portfolio Manager account. And now we're going to scroll down so we can see the space use area. We're going to click on K-12 school, and that takes us to our space attribute page, and we can see the current values we have for our space attributes. Now our first scenario has to do with correcting from default values. Actually, we already went through this in a previous presentation. When we originally set up our Portfolio Manager account and then we set up our school facility in the account, we just used default values as placeholders to do that part of it. Later we went back and corrected. So let's sort of review what we did. For example, in the gross floor area, we're going to come over here to Edit, and we go to this page, and you can see we have two options. We can update or we can correct. Well, since it's a correction, of course, we're going to choose that. But since we haven't made any changes here, we're just going to click on cancel. Now we're going to look at updating floor area values, and the scenario we're going to use is, let's say you had a couple portables added on to your school over the summer, and you have now more energy use associated with those portables. So we're going to go back over here to edit. So we would be adding 1,800 square feet. That changes this number to 53,400. Then we go over here to update. And then we're going to go over here. The effective date. Okay, now we have a new effective date. So this happened over this last summer. So this is, let's say, 07/31/2012. Okay, and now we're going to save. And now we have our new square footage. So we're done with that, and we're going to go click save. Okay, now the next change, the next scenario we're going to look at is our PCs. So we click on our school space again, scroll down, we find where the PCs are, number of PCs. So we had 98. Now we're going to click on edit, and we just put in a computer lab and added 30 new computers. So this number is going to go up from 98 to 128. That happened this summer. So we're going to put the new date in there. It was an update, so we click on update, and then we click save. And that takes us back to our space attribute page, and we'll save that. And now we're back to our facility page. Now just for fun, let's see what effect it would have on our score if the change that we made to our number of PCs we made the year before. Because right now we changed it from 98 computers to 128, but our effective date was this past summer. But let's see what would happen if it was the summer before. So we find our PC attribute, we go over and click on edit. We're going to change the effective date to 2011. It's going to be a correction. And then we're going to save, and then we're going to save our space attribute page. Okay, so we went from a 35 to a 38. So you get an idea of the magnitude of the impact of these kinds of changes. Now let's look at where to find secondary space types. Now before we go there, I want you to notice one thing here. Our current rating is 27. We're going to make a change by adding a secondary space type, and let's see how that affects our current rating. We scroll down to space use, and then we're going to come back up here and add a space, enter a name for this space. It's going to be parking lot. Now we're going to check a space type, and we go all the way down near the bottom and click on parking. The next thing is we're going to enter an effective date. So in other words, if this parking lot just got added, we'd put the date that we added it. But since this parking lot has been there since the school was built, we're going to keep the effective date that we originally put in when we set up Portfolio Manager account, or when we set up this facility in our Portfolio Manager account. So now we click continue, and we come to add a parking lot page. Scroll down and take a look at what our options are. There are some data entry blocks that we have to fill in. So in this scenario, we have an open parking lot, but we do have to put 0 in these other blocks that don't apply. For example, enclosed floor area, we have 0. For non-enclosed floor area with a roof, we don't have any of that. for open floor area without roof. That's what we have, and we calculated we have 65,000 square feet of lighted parking lot connected to the main meter of our school. So we're going to add 65,000, and the effective date is since the school was built. That's what we have already on here for the effective date. Weekly hours of access. Now, if you have a gated parking lot where you know what the hours are that it's open, then you can put that in there. In this scenario, it's pretty much open all the time, so it's going to be keyed to the time that the parking lot is available anytime, basically. So I'm going to put in there, let's say 16 hours times 6 days a week, and that comes up to about 96 hours per week. So I think we have everything correct on there. Then we're going to click on Save. Now we come back, scroll down here, and we see that we have our parking lot space, 65,000 square feet. It represents 55% of the total floor area for this facility. But one other thing I want you to look at. We're going to scroll back up, and we're going to look at our new Energy Star score. It's still low, 35, but it's about 8 points higher than the 27 that we started out with. So you can see that made an 8-point difference. And this concludes step 3, inputting data and getting a score, and specifically this last part, part 4, updating and correcting space attributes, as well as adding secondary space types.